Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior learning and development professional and an author from Toronto, Canada, Bianca Baumann. Bianca, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. Bianca is the Vice President, Learning Solutions and Innovation at Ardent Learning. She teaches learning experience design at OISE, and she's the co-author of a book, Think Like a Marketer, Train Like an L&D Pro, and we'll speak about her book as well. So, Bianca, my first question to you, you worked across multiple industries like marketing, automotive, financial, and other event planning. How have these diverse experiences shaped your approach to L&D?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. The interesting thing is, and I keep on saying this to my team here at Arden, that in the end, it doesn't matter which industry we work in, because we bring our L&D toolkit,
Yeah.
right? And we just apply our knowledge. However, of course, as you go through different industries, there's definitely something to learn from all of them.
Mm,
So I think what shaped me the most was the first job in marketing, hence, the book that's coming out
yeah.
soon. And it really inspired me to always look at other industries and see what they do well that we could borrow for learning and development. So marketing is a good one, product marketing. I like to think about training as a product because in the end, that's really what it is, right?
Mm,
And so how can we get this to our people? The other industry that really shaped me a lot is events, the
mm,
events industry as well, because the events industry is so good in creating experiences. And I know in learning and development, we talk about learning experiences, but often we still just see the one and done kind of events,
mm.
right? Versus full on journeys. So I would say those are definitely the two industries that
Interesting.
shaped me the most.
Very interesting. Thank you. And how do you assess the specific learning needs of an organization to tailor your L&D solutions?
It's all about asking good questions
Hmm.
and listening.
Mm,
So when we meet with our clients, the first question I really want to know is, why are we here? And
mm,
often the client would say, well, because we need training. It's like, okay, let's
mm,
take a step back. It's like, why do you think you need training? What's happening right now, right? What are some of the challenges? Because I really want to dig down to that business
yeah,
need. Because without a business need, there's probably not even, really a need for training. They just
right.
think there's a need for training. So
Mm,
yeah, lots of discovery questions. I like to run a workshop. It's called an impact and clarity workshop.
hmm.
I usually send out a survey to stakeholders ahead of time that has questions such as why now? What would happen if we don't do this? What is your
Mm,
vision? Questions like this. And then I meet for 2 hours with them or 90 minutes, and then we go through the answers together to just align
mm,
everyone. And that's usually my starting point. And
mm.
from there, we can then identify, okay, who are the learners, right? Next step so we can really create learner-centric solutions and then design the solution for them.
Fascinating. Thank you. And what are some common challenges organizations face when they're trying to implement a new L&D strategy? And how do you help them?
The biggest challenge in my experience is that there is no alignment
Mm,
across the business, the stakeholders. Hence, I have my impact and clarity workshop beginning of projects.
mm,
But it's also that we forget about the change management aspect. So imagine we are creating a learning experience for a new system that
mm,
really affects the day-to-day of every learner. If we
mm,
don't think about the change management, if we don't think about what's in it for our learners, then the whole training experience will most likely fail,
mm,
right? So I think that is definitely the biggest challenge. And we often don't think about it. We often don't think
mm.
about the change management. We're just so focused on creating impactful training, but how impactful is it if
Right.
it actually doesn't really hit the
Mm,
mark, right?
mm. Well said. And therefore, a follow-up question for you is how can organizations foster a culture of continuous learning and innovation?
If I had the answer to that, I would be a billionaire, I think. But what I'm
Absolutely, yes.
trying, right?
Mm,
What I'm trying with our clients is um, to build to build our learning experiences differently. So for
mm,
one, I like to so often what happens, let me start the other way. Often what happens is we cramp a lot of content into our learning experiences.
mm,
And so what happens is that learners quickly feel overwhelmed.
mm,
So first, if we again start with a learner-centric design, I can design learning experiences that fit better into the day-to-day of the learner,
mm,
which means we get a bigger buy-in from them. So that's
mm,
like one pillar, right?
mm,
But then again, what we need, and I mentioned it a couple of times already, is the stakeholder buy-in, the business leader buy-in. Without
mm,
that, it doesn't work. We can't create that culture either. So it really needs to be employee-led. So we need to get them to the point that they are curious, and we have to create spaces and environments where we can foster that.
mm,
Then, from the bottom up, from the top down, we have to make sure that everyone is bought in, they're role modeling the
mm,
curiosity, and then we kind of meet in the middle and we can create that culture.
mm,
I think the other important piece is to recognize people for a job well done. It sounds so simple, but often we
mm.
don't celebrate those little
Correct,
milestones and
correct.
successes. And I'm not talking about a badge and gamification. No, I'm
Mm,
talking
mm.
something a little bit more human,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Well said. My next question, Banka, is with rapid technological advancements, workforce transformation is becoming much more common.
Mm.
How can L&D facilitate smooth transition, and how is technology changing L&D? Two separate questions.
Yeah, definitely. So first off, workforce transformations are extremely messy,
Mm,
and learning and development is one small part of them. So
mhm,
if you think of workforce transformations, you also think of operations, you think of governance, you think of any other elements, talent management, right, that really feed into the overall organization.
mm,
Also, workforce transformation are often used in the same sentence than digital transformations. They might be similar, but they might be very different, right? So I think workforce transformations are much bigger than just a digital
mm,
transformation.
mm,
But in terms of L&D and workforce transformation, again, I think it's having a seat at the table early on to have the conversations about, okay, where do we want to transform to, right? Like workforce transformation becomes this buzzword already
yeah.
by now. And I think really having that, it's going back to that business need. It's like, okay, in the moment we have a lot of changes, technology changes, AI changes. So
Mm,
obviously organizations are looking at their talent pool and say, okay, what do we have to do? How do we have to transform our workforce?
yeah.
Reskilling goes hand in hand with this as
Mm,
well. So
mm,
in general, organizations really have to look at where are we today with our skills? Where do we want to go in the future? What do we need?
mm,
And then workforce transformation has to fill that gap, right? And
mm,
that's where learning and development then can come in and
mm,
help create some of these massive training programs that
mm.
goes with that transformation. And yeah, the technology piece, I hope I answered that a little bit here as
You
well
did.
when
You did. You
talking
did.
about the skills. The
Yeah.
one thing I want to mention though is especially around AI right now, we see a lot of conversation about we need to upskill on AI.
Mm,
And there's two parts to this. There's the technology part,
yeah.
but there's also the soft skills part, right?
Mm,
Because in the end, this is a human machine relationship. So we
correct.
have to make sure someone checks the outputs.
Mm,
The challenge now becomes if the younger generation who's just so used to using AI
mm,
know how to check those outputs, like the critical and analytical thinking, then we're in
correct.
hot waters, right? And this is where learning and development can really make a big
Mm,
difference. And it's probably not just only the younger generation, it's everyone.
mm,
Because, we
absolutely.
probably get lazy at some point.
Correct.
So, just take the output and copy and paste, right? So we
Correct.
have to be careful.
Great response.
Hmm.
My next question is that, and I've often spoken to leaders when I tell them about L&D, and they said, well, it's the responsibility of the human resources function.
Hmm.
My question is, how important is it for organizations to integrate L&D into their overall business strategy?
Oh my gosh, if it were up to me, L&D would not report into HR.
Mm,
So that, answers your question right there. How important is it that L&D is actually intertwined with the business? Extremely important.
yeah.
So I really wish that, organizations would reorganize
Mm,
and, ideally there is a chief learning officer who reports directly to the CEO and
mm,
not to the CHRO because
mm.
they are two different functions, right? They
Correct.
have two
Correct.
different goals. I mean, yeah, in the end, we want to make sure, you know, our people are happy and well educated and whatnot.
Mm,
But for me, HR and L&D are peers, just like talent acquisition and talent management, and we have to work together.
mm,
But yeah, it's definitely two, in my mind, two separate
mm.
departments. And the reason it's just so important is if L&D sits with the business, it's so much easier to identify challenges hopefully even before they happen, right? So we could be
Mm.
much, much more proactive and also become better subject matter experts in
Right.
the business lines.
Well said. And in the
Mhm.
context of reskilling programs, how can organizations identify which skills are necessary for future success? And a few minutes back, you were talking about AI.
Yeah, the most important thing is do not go out to, let's say, the World Economic Forum and pull down a list of the top 10 skills we need in
Yes.
2025, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
because every organization has different needs. I
Hmm.
don't use the information from the World Economic Forum to inform,
Hmm.
the skills that you will need in your organization, but the best way to really identify this is to talk to your people, for one, to kind of identify where they're at, where they want to be. But then in the end, it is that business decision. You have to talk to leaders to understand where they want to take the business. You have to
Right.
look at the market to understand where the markets are and where the market is going, where
Hmm.
the competitors are, where the competitors are going. And obviously, AI is a huge part of that in order to stay competitive. But yeah, you have to identify that baseline, that benchmark that you want to get to. Then you take a look at where are you at right now, and then
Hmm.
obviously there will be that skills gap.
Hmm.
I'm a big believer of skills-based organizations to really help internal talent mobility because I truly do believe that organizations have the right people. They're just not in the right jobs right now.
Right. Well said. One more question relating to L&D, and then I want to move to your book. How can
Mhm.
organizations ensure that their reskilling initiatives are aligned with market trends and the future workplace needs?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what I was just saying, right? Like really doing your research, doing your benchmarking,
Hmm.
because if you just go out to the internet and pull down a list from somewhere, it's not going to work. It needs
Hmm.
to align to what you're doing. But I think what's important is to some market research, for example, is a great starting point. What are
Hmm.
competitors doing? Where are they at, right? Some organizations have that capability in-house, but
Hmm.
there's excellent third parties that you could leverage to help you with that research as
Right.
well.
Right.
But yeah, in the end, you do not get around the fact that this is data driven. Without good data, you should not start any reskilling efforts
Hmm.
because it's like, it would be like you hop in your car and say, "Okay, I want to go on vacation," and then you're sitting in the driveway, but you then remember, "I actually don't know where I'm going." Right?
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so you have to be extremely careful, and you need to be data
Absolutely.
driven.
Absolutely. So, Bianca, let's now talk about your book. You're the co-author of a book
Mhm.
titled Think Like a Marketer, Train Like an L&D Pro. And you said it's due for release now?
Yeah, May 27th. So very
Okay,
close.
well, congratulations
Yeah,
and all the best. I'm
thank
going to ask
you.
all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Bianca's book,
That's
Think
great.
Like a Marketer, Train Like an L&D Pro. So tell me, can you explain the main hypothesis or the premise of your book?
Yes. So first off, as you mentioned, I co-authored the book with Mike Taylor. And Mike and I have been working together since 2017,
Hmm.
and we met on a panel about marketing and learning and development. And
Okay.
so, what both of us realized is that marketing and learning actually have a lot in common.
Hmm.
So, one of your first questions was, how did different industries influence me? So, I already mentioned the marketing piece there.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
my first official learning and development role was was working with Eloqua, which is now part of Oracle, and my job was to teach our customers who were
Hmm.
marketers how to be better marketers. And so at this point, I realized that marketing and learning have so much in common, which is we're really
Hmm.
trying to change behavior,
Yeah.
right? And marketers are just doing it so much better. To be fair, they
Hmm.
also have budget, right? So that definitely plays into
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
so the premise of the book is really less about how we can promote our learning offerings. There's
Hmm.
definitely some tips in there for that, but it's so much more than that. It really does talk about how we can bring marketing techniques into learning and development to design better, to make
Hmm.
data-driven decisions, to use technology better, to help us with workforce transformations and
Hmm.
upskilling efforts.
Hmm. And you said that, and I agree with you, marketing has a lot to take from L&D and vice versa. But are there any misconceptions that you have come across about applying marketing principles to L&D?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is that people kind of when they hear that we're looking at this, I think the biggest one would be the learner persona one. So, marketers use buyer personas,
Hmm.
and when we use learner personas, a question I often get is like, yeah, Bianca, but they don't solve all of our problems. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, they don't, but they get us one step closer to where we want to be. So instead
Yep.
of thinking about content first, we think about the learner first, even if it's
Hmm.
not perfect. And so I think the misconception is really that it goes back to the budget piece as well, right? Marketing has much more money, they can do more research.
Hmm.
We would only, if we leverage marketing techniques, we would only do it like half-hearted, mainly because we don't have the same budget. So,
Hmm.
I think the learner personas are a
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
example
Yeah.
for that. But yeah, other than that, I haven't heard too many too much pushback on this
Absolutely.
approach.
And
Mhm.
what would you say are some key marketing strategies that L&D professionals can adopt to improve learner engagement?
Yeah, definitely thinking about attention grabbing visuals and good copy,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
It seems so simple, but writing well, I'm always amazed by how bad a lot of L&D professionals are when it comes
Hmm.
to writing.
Yeah.
But so I think that's a crucial piece, which is closely related to content strategy. So really getting organized with our content. I mean, we have so much content, we don't even know what content exists,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Learner personas, I just mentioned that. And then the last one I would mention is learning campaigns. So instead
Hmm.
of thinking of a one and done event, it's really how can we create these ongoing experiences or campaigns? And again, marketers are really great with that. One of
Hmm.
my favorite examples here is the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is always this massive marketing event,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And people are anticipating the Super Bowl ad.
Hmm.
But these companies do so much more, and we might not even realize there's usually a social media campaign
Yeah.
attached to it, right?
Hmm.
There's some follow-up after. So it's not just this one 30-second Super Bowl ad.
Absolutely.
That's an example of a campaign, right? That
Hmm.
really makes a difference.
Well said. So I have time for two more questions for you. My next question is, how does your book address the challenges of capturing and retaining learners' attention in a corporate environment?
Yeah, the first chapter is focused on how our brains work
Hmm.
and how we can really design differently. So Mike is doing a fantastic job outlining a couple of tips and tricks of, how the brain works and how we can use that to our advantage when
Hmm.
we create our training. So that's one piece. And the retention piece and attention grabbing, so that's the brain part, and then the visuals and the writing I already mentioned. And then the retention part really comes in through two of our chapters, which is the learner journey learning campaign approach,
Hmm.
so,
Hmm.
which I already mentioned, but then also the measurement piece, because without capturing data
Mm,
and feeding that back into our experience and improving the experience, we wouldn't really help our learners.
mm,
And one of the ideas is let's not wait until the end to ask how the experience was. And it's like, oh, you didn't like it and it didn't have an impact. Too
mm,
bad, because
mm.
now you're done.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's really in the moment when can we actually be much more iterative and make
Mm,
adjustments.
mm.
So that will really help with the retention piece, is that learner journey
Well
aspect.
said, well said. And my last question for you, what advice would you give to L&D professionals looking to innovate and drive growth?
Innovation is an interesting word because every
Mm,
organization is at a different spot. So
yeah.
what I would say to that is don't get intimidated by what other organizations are
Mm,
doing, because you need to identify where you're at and what innovation means to you.
yeah.
So that's the first piece of advice. The
Mm,
second piece is it doesn't have to be costly. Identify areas where, innovation really means you take two existing things and put them
yeah.
together and make it into a new thing, right? Or three existing things. And
Yeah.
so just like, Mike and I thought about this marketing and the learning piece, what are some areas in your organization that you can
Mm,
bring people, ideas, concepts together to create something different? And
mm,
then start small, call it a
mm,
pilot or, a beta version of something, and then
mm,
kind of test it out and go from
mm.
there.
Well said. And on that note, Bianca, thank you so much for speaking to me. I think your
Mm.
three pieces of advice: don't get intimidated by what other companies are doing. Second, you said don't um, have to plan only very costly or expensive processes. And the third one you said was start small. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own journey. I think we covered some interesting ground on L&D. You talked to me about some of the specific learning needs and how organizations can identify that. You spoke to me about common challenges, about the role of technology. Uh, you also were very clear L&D does not or should not be a part of HR, but should be reporting directly to the CEO. Then we covered a little bit of ground on your book, Think Like a Marketer, Train Like an L&D Pro, which is being released, you said, on the 27th of May. All the very best for it. Thank you for speaking to me and good luck to you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.